We're now reaching the last of our 5 different types of CompletableFuture method groupings, and we're going to talk about arbitrary-arity methods. As you can see here, they are the smallest of the different categories of CompletableFuture methods. There's only 2 of them, and what they're used for is they're used to process completable futures in bulk. So they're basically a generalization of things like then combine or except either, which work on 2 completable futures. These work on n completable futures. So these arbitrary-arity methods return a completable future that's triggered after the completion of any or all other completable futures that were passed as parameters to these methods. And here's the basic 2 methods we're talking about, all of and any of. Both of them, as you can see, take so-called var_args parameters, which is basically a arbitrary sized list of values. That's why they're called arbitrary-arity, for the number of parameters can be arbitrary. And both of them, curiously enough, return completable futures to void, which means that there is no return value that comes back from the completable future. All you know is something has happened. And because of that, they're a little complicated to use without doing some special magic and using the wrapper facade pattern and so on to make things work properly. All of returns a completable future that will complete when all of the completable futures in the var_args parameter list complete. So as the name implies, it's all of. When they're all done, then we get triggered and we know that they're all done. In contrast, any of returns a completable future that completes when any completable future in the parameters complete. So again, if we have 50 things going on asynchronously and we use all of, that completable future that comes back won't trigger till all 50 things are done. In contrast, if we use any of, then when the first of those 50 things completes, then the completable future will be triggered. So hopefully that gives you a feeling for how these 2 things compare and contrast. So just to recap, the return completable future can be used to wait for any or all of the n completable futures in this var_args array to be done, to be complete with their asynchronous processing. Now, what typically happens here is you get back this completable future, but you don't usually just block on it. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but you typically don't. Instead, what you do is you typically use completion stage methods, which themselves will be triggered when that completable future is done. And the benefit of all this is it makes the programs you're writing more responsive by not blocking caller code. So you can basically, in a nutshell, set a bunch of things in motion and then have a single non-blocking way of waiting for any or all things to finish. So we're going to focus here on the all of method, which is kind of like the then combine method, which was a completion stage method we talked about earlier, on steroids. So it basically takes the then combine method and goes to the fullest extent to have it have many parameters. Now, as you'll see, or maybe you've already got a feeling for this, these arbitrary-arity methods are very difficult to program directly, and that's because they don't give back values that have results. They just tell you if they're done or not, which is a little bit wonky. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap the all of method. You could do the same thing for any of, but we're going to wrap the all of method within a really cool class, which is going to be what's called a futures collector. And you'll get a chance to see how that works. And it's really, really, really cool. And you'll also use a variant of that in programming assignment number 3, which we'll talk about. So that's the end of our overview of arbitrary-arity methods. You're probably somewhat befuddled as to what they're really good for because I only explained to you what they do at a conceptual level. But don't worry, we're going to talk about how to use them and how they function in a moment.